Hey, good day, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of Techstrong Group, and welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound, live roundtable edition. Um, we're glad you're joining us. If you are, hey, this is a live roundtable that's driven by studio or by our attendees' participation. We're looking forward to having you as an important part of today's webinar, learning experience roundtable. It gives us a chance to hear from you what you want to talk about. Before we get to that, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. DevOps Unbound is a bi weekly or semi weekly, excuse me, I always mess that up, every other week video production of us here on Techstrong TV, done in partnership with our good friends at Tricentis, worldwide leaders in continuous testing. And then about once every 4 to 6 weeks, we do what we call this live roundtable edition of DevOps Unbound, where we do it with a live audience of folks who have dialed in or logged on, and we kind of go with them to give us, what you want to talk about and to help drive the conversation. Today's episode is entitled DevOps Building Blocks, Building on the Shoulders of DevOps Giants. And it's actually the kickoff of a 5-part series we're going to be doing on DevOps.com around DevOps building blocks and latest trends in DevOps. So stay tuned for that on future episodes of DevOps Unbound. If you told me to pick my dream panel for DevOps building blocks, building on the shoulders of DevOps giants, I don't know if I could come up with a better panel than this, than what we have for you today. I'm going to introduce them to you in about 1 second. Let me quickly go back, though, to how we want you, the audience, to interact with us. For many of you in your browsers, on your right-hand side, you'll see the Big Marker Communications interface. And for many of you, the word chat is in bold up on top there. And then underneath that are several subcategories of chat. That public chat is your primary communication tool. But it is public chat. So when you put something in there, everyone who's attending the webinar, as well as us and our panelists, can see it. We can respond to it. We will try to respond to as many of your chats as we can. Some we will elevate to the discussion level with the panel. Others, panel members, or even other attendees may answer you within the chat. But it's a great place to get the conversations rolling. However, it's not the only place. We do have the Q&A section. If you look next to the word chat, there's one that says Q&A. If you have a question or a topic for the panel itself, I encourage you to put it in there. We'll see it and we'll bring it up to the panel for their views. So public chat, Q&A. We try not to use the private chat, but if you're here for some other reason and you want to do some private chatting with people, I guess consenting adults will do what they want. But we encourage you to use public chat here or the Q&A section. All right. As you can see, many of us are already logging in saying where we're from. And one of my favorite things is always to see where people come from all over the world. From the very first time I've been on the internet, it amazes me about how we can see, where our audience comes from. And I'm seeing from people from all over the world. Damon's joining us from Hawaii. John's in Amsterdam. But we have people in Sofia, Bulgaria, and Austin, Texas, and Munich, Germany, Newfoundland, Canada, just all over the world. So thank you for joining us, everyone, and we're going to get started. As I said, I've got a dream panel to introduce you to. Let me start off by first introducing you to my good friend Damon Edwards, who joins us today from the island of Maui. Damon, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. Excuse me, I'm Damon Edwards. Once upon a time, I was a technology operations consultant. That's where I met our friend John Willis here, another panelist, and he went to this thing called DevOps Days, the first one ever in Ghent, Belgium, came back raving about it, and we got together and made the second DevOps Days, which the first one in the US, third overall. that then became really kind of this cultural phenomenon that led to the DevOps movement that we have today. So it's been a pretty wild ride. In the meantime, I started a software company called Rundeck. Was a runbook automation product. We were bought by PagerDuty a couple years ago, so now I do various product strategy, AI, and things like that at PagerDuty.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us while you're on family vacation, Damon. I appreciate it. Damon mentioned John
This
Willis.
is my DevOps family.
I hear you, but still, I don't know if I take time out of sunny Hawaii to get on this, so I appreciate your sacrifice. Damon mentioned John Willis. John is a man who needs no introduction, obviously, to DevOps audiences. But hey, John, welcome. Thank you for joining us from DevOps Days in Amsterdam today. Why don't you give people a little bit of your background?
Yeah. Hey, Alan. Thanks. So a couple of things. One, I just started doing work with Techstrong, so that's exciting. With my good friend Alan, the chief honcho at Techstrong, and just quickly. I've written a number of books. I've been, like Damon said, we really sort of pioneered DevOps. I believe it was the second DevOps Days, Damon, not sure, but I think somebody might have snuck in a baby one, but the second real one was in LinkedIn in California. But anyway, quickly, probably most notable books: DevOps Handbook, Beyond the Phoenix Project, a new one out called Investments Unlimited, and I've got a 10-year project. My Deming book, Profound Journey, is actually orderable on Amazon, due out on August 8th. Done a number of startups, sold a company to Dell, sold a company to Docker, was early in at Chef. And then over the last few years, I spent 3 years on executive team at Red Hat. So yeah, just all around DevOps stuff.
Absolutely. And there's a lot more he's not saying, but a very impressive list of it, nevertheless, John. And yes, the press release announcing John and a leadership role here at Techstrong is actually out today. I think you get it on DevOps.com or on Security Boulevard. My next guest is also someone I've had the pleasure of knowing, I think almost from the beginning of when I launched DevOps.com, almost 10 years ago now. She is a fellow at IBM, among other things, and she's actually, let's see if I got this right, CTO of the CIO of the CTOs of it. No, Rosalind, you. This is why I let you introduce yourself. Rosalind Radcliffe.
Thank you. It's the IBM CIO DevSecOps CTO. So I am the DevSecOps CTO for our IBM CIO office. We have to have just a bunch of acronyms. In my new role, I'm responsible for the DevSecOps transformation in our CIO organization, and the IBM CIO organization runs IBM. So we run the systems that run IBM. And just to give a little perspective, we run a financial system because we have IBM financing, we run manufacturing, we run lots of systems. So it's a relatively large environment, over 3 million MIPS from a Z standpoint. So it's a large hybrid cloud environment. DevOps, yes, I've been doing it a while. I guess the best thing I like to be known for is making ZOS DevOpsable and really changing the way we can do Z to be part of the DevOps transformation and just another system that people work with. It just happens to have better qualities of service than anything else, but just another system. And so it really is what I focus on mostly, though in my current role, I'm responsible for DevSecOps across the board.
Excellent. Thank you, Rosalind. I knew if I said CIO, CTO enough, I wouldn't be too wrong. I just had it in the wrong order, but thank you. Speaking of CTOs, let me introduce you to our next panelist, Mav Turner from Tricentis. Mav, welcome. Why don't you give people a little of your background?
Great. Thanks, Alan, and thanks for having me here today. I come more from the IT, the ops side of the DevOps equation, and then moved more into the development side about 25 years ago, doing all the infrastructure, networking, systems administration, and then moved over to software development, product management, getting products to market. And then I've been at Tricentis for about 1.5 years here, but I focus more specifically on how do we build products that can enable teams to be more successful with modern practices, whether that's on modern technology stacks, whether that's just how do we do those transformations. And like Rosalind said, as Tricentis overall, we've got that breadth on the mainframe and these different this mixture of technology, and trying to get it all to work together is super interesting. And so that's where Tricentis helps teams who are trying to do those transformations with this mix of technology and help them be successful, move fast, lower these cycle times, release faster, et cetera, et cetera. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you, and thanks for joining us today, Mav. Last but not least, also joining us from a hotel room today, it's a common theme, all the way in Munich, where he's attending. Is it SUSCon, Mitchell?
Yep, SUSCon.
Yep.
2020.
Is my co-host. He's also CTO here at Techstrong Group, as well as principal analyst at Techstrong Research, Mitchell Ashley. Mitch, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, good to be here, and what a great panel. I'm just honored to be on wherever I am in the world. So, as you mentioned, I'm CTO and work in our analyst group, and Alan and I go back doing startup companies and did a few before that as well. So, both a practitioner as well as a product creator. So great to be here. I will be probably more on chat because we have plenty of folks to speak, and I think I'm on dial-up here, not Wi-Fi, so we'll see how it goes. But if I go off video, I'm online, I'm chat. I'll see you all there.
Well, thank you, Mitchell. I guess we could tell who's staying at the good hotels by what the quality of their Wi-Fi is.
I need to talk to my boss about that, I guess.
Yeah, I think John Willis wins hands down. But anyway, all right. So we're going to get started. Again, audience, if you've got questions, jump into the chat, go into the Q&A section. We're looking for you to participate. You help make this go. So I'm going to kick things off, though, by throwing this out at John and Damon and asking for you guys to both individually can respond. It's been a long, strange trip since that first DevOps days in Silicon Valley, right? We've seen DevOps kind of go through that classic Gartner hype cycle of, just impossible to reach heights of hype down and maybe into the trough of disillusionment where people were saying, oh, this DevOps doesn't work. Well, as John's friend, I'm drawing a blank now, said, John, who'd you work with at Red Hat? Andrew,
yeah.
Yeah, it's Andrew Clay. He ever said the DevOps you get is the DevOps you deserve, right?
Yeah.
And I think that some of that is very, very true. But DevOps has driven or risen out of the trough of disillusionment from a hype cycle point of view, where, look, it's a real thing. I don't think you don't catch a lot of people, as I did early on, who said, that's DevOps is BS, it's marketing talk, it's not real, it's all kumbaya stuff. No, it's real. And there's a big community around it. There's a big kind of macro economy, industries around. There's a lot of solutions built around it. But what is it today, right? Compared to where it was? How would you put your finger on that elusive beast? Let alone where's it going tomorrow? So Damon, I always think you're a great thinker. What do you think about that? Not sure if Damon's getting us.
Well, I think, yeah, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah, we hear you.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I'll try this. I think the idea of DevOps, right, which was we had this functional alignment. Everything was very much, stovetop silos. And, when Patrick Dubois first came up with the idea for a DevOps days, his idea was very true, that if a developer and someone in operations showed up at the same conference, one of them was in the wrong place, right? That's the world that we came from, right? And the idea of DevOps, at first we just were trying to figure out what is that conflict? Why are Dev and Ops so at odds? And at first we thought it was a deployment problem, right? We just sort out deployment, then everything's going to solve itself, right? And then we put a lot of emphasis on that, and then realized, gee, that really isn't it. There's still problems, and it kind of expanded from there. And we realized it's just sort of this how we align around our work, right? So it's this constant shift from the way humans want to organize, which is by functional specialty, to way we need to organize to make sure the work flows, horizontally, work flows, smoothly, consistently, rapidly, high quality, kind of from that proverbial sort of left to right. So I think, a lot of the early hype was, hey, if we just use these certain tools, these problems are going to go away, right? And it turns out that wasn't the answer. Turns out there was really hard people problems and organizational problems, which involves management and incentives and just a lot of things that aren't what we all want to talk about, which was writing cool code, right? So I think and that initial hype was around, oh, it's just DevOps tools, right? Or, oh, all we have to do is just change those deployment people, right? Or change that build and release team. And I think people got kind of were a little, they try to climb the mountaintop and they saw there's another mountain in front of them, right? I think that's where the disillusionment kind of came from. And I think now people are realizing that this is just the way that we have to work. And I think that's a long, continuous journey, like you see in manufacturing and other industries, moving from that sort of functional, siloed view of the world to a horizontal, from customer aligned view of the world. And I think the companies that have embraced that are seeing a tremendous amount of benefit from it. And I think that's undeniable, and that's what keeps everybody going.
Yeah,
John?
I think, it was interesting today at DevOps Days Amsterdam. Andrew Clay Schaefer, who you mentioned earlier, gave a workshop on domain-driven platform, DDD for platform engineering. It was pretty interesting, and he talked about, and I made an interesting point, is that you talk about the technology adoption lifecycle or crossing the chasm, right? And I agree with this for the most part, that the innovators and early adopters of DevOps, they were seeking advantage. That's why a lot of the early sort of greenfield, like there was obvious advantage, the Ubers, all these companies that were doing this. And then he made this statement that the early majority, late majority, the laggards really are seeking legitimacy. Now that's I love Andrew, but that's sort of an Andrewism. But I think there is some truth to that, right? That there is a big part of the DevOps movement as it's matured where people don't really understand why they're adopting this. They adopt it because, basically the bank X is doing it. We got to do it because we're bank Y, these industry driven. I do think there are a lot of examples of, seeking advantage in large corporations that are starting out in DevOps now, trying to get on the DevOps train. But I think there is some truth about a lot of what we've seen about the sort of the trough of disillusionness of just where is DevOps, and overall, I think that is a lot of that sort of seeking legitimacy versus the early seeking advantage.
Fair. Hey, I know the rest of the panel wants to chime in, but I want to start bringing in some audience stuff. So Lynn has asked us, how can organizations leverage the best practices and lessons learned from the DevOps giants to enhance their own DevOps journey? And I think that's a great, Rosalind, you probably, and Mav, the both of you, I'd like you to chime in. You guys probably spend a good amount of your time and have spent a good amount of your time saying, how can we take, in the case of IBM, drinking their own champagne on DevOps or eating their own dog food, I guess, depending on your view. And how do we get those lessons to our customers to save them some, idiot taxes and make them more effective?
Yeah, it really is a wonderful area in the DevOps community, in the fact that so many people are willing to share what happened, what they've done. They're telling stories, they're publishing books, they're publishing papers. So there's a lot of material available to learn from and hear from, so that, events like this, DevOps.com, all of these things are sharing the stories to help companies adopt. But I think the best advice, the best important lesson from all of it is it's all about people. It's all about culture. It's about changing the ways of working and changing the organization to work in a new way. And adopting tools and automation and all those things are absolutely critical and critically important. But the biggest lesson from every single story we hear is it's all about people. And you have to get the people to understand the change and adopt the change. And then listen to all the stories that are out there. Listen to the experiences, especially those not so successful things. So listen in the stories for all those not successful things. So, everybody else wrote a book, so I wrote a book too. Enterprise Bug Busting. And in it, I have stories about the not so successful things as well. And it really is important. Listen for those not successful attempts. And it really is, changing culture is the hardest thing, but it's the thing that helps make DevOps the most successful, or DevSecOps, or whatever you want to call it, because we all know about this hype cycle. We know terms have an interesting way of having a life or not. The important thing is this cultural change, and so we're trying to share the stories so we don't make the same mistakes, but everybody needs to focus on culture.
Yeah, I think that's super critical. Again, coming from a vendor that is trying to sell you tools in this space, I do not want to sell you a tool if you do not know what problem you're trying to solve. You're not committed at the cultural change, because it won't matter. It will become shelfware, and then the CSAT issues, like that's just a lot of work for everybody and no value. If you're not clear on the problem you're trying to solve, you're not bought in on that cultural change. I completely agree. And it comes back to something that John was saying earlier, which is why I love this question, because it's just a natural extension of that, which is a lot of times people say, oh, we need to do this because that's what's in the press, or that's what people are saying. We need to do cloud. We need to do AI. We need to do DevOps. We need to do DevSecOps. Whatever that is, I need it. Just give me the easy button to get to that. And if you don't understand what problem you're trying to solve, you don't understand the change that's required to be successful, it may not actually be a good fit for your organization. And cloud is a great example where we've seen that trend go through, right? Where everybody has to go to cloud. Now you kind of go on-prem. Now you say, what's a pragmatic solution for my business? And I think you're seeing that maturation. And it's the same thing with DevOps. Of what problem are you trying to solve? Is your biggest business problem that you need to release faster? Do you have a problem somewhere upstream from that and you're shipping the wrong things entirely? Well, okay, optimizing over here, is it going to change the business impact? And that's where I see a lot of people that say that they failed with a transformation of any type. That's the root cause, is they weren't solving the right problem because they didn't spend enough time there. Instead, they kind of jumped on the bandwagon of whatever the fun marketing term to talk about was, right?
Absolutely. We're getting Mitchell and Damon have put some good stuff up in the chat. Again, audience, feel free to jump in with this. But it's an interesting phenomenon. When I first got into DevOps, right, and I come from security, a lot of my friends in security back then, they were less than welcoming, truthfully, to the whole notion of DevOps. And this cultural thing that Rosalind is talking about being people, that it's about the people, right? A lot of cynical people would say, that's that kumbaya BS, right? Show me tools, show me processes, and that's what I work on, right? That's what I live by. I'm from Missouri, a show me state, and all of that. And they gave short shrift to the whole cultural people piece of it, where, I don't really care. We're 10 years here, and it's still about the people. It's still the culture, and the whole idea about it is still more important than the tools, in my mind anyway. John, you?
Yeah. Did I lose? I'm still
No,
here.
we got you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think The culture thing is interesting, right? We say change culture, but you really don't change culture, right? I think in the early days of DevOps, Damon, who was that guy from Google? He was that great speaker. We brought him in to speak at a couple of DevOps days, but he talked about you don't change culture, you change behavior. Culture is like we're in Amsterdam, and I'm going to use a lot of Andrewisms today because he had a great presentation, but he's like, you don't change being Dutch, So it is about sort of the behavior. So sometimes I totally agree with Rosalind. The impact of culture, is paramount, right? Like understanding how, but we do sometimes, as an industry or as a group or community, sort of hand wavy the culture thing, and sometimes it's over sort of expressed, and we don't really sort of dive into. Again, another Andrewism, but Kevin Bear has been talking about this for years, socio-technical systems and where they take us. So anyway, so I think we just have to be careful about using the word culture and over-rotating on it, because it really is humans and behavior and motivation and a lot of those things. So we have to get to the underneath. I'll shut up here in a second, but we can't just hand wave and say that's a bad culture, fix it, right?
Well, but John, that's in line with what someone here in the audience chatted in. That isn't bad culture or improving the culture a euphemism for bad management, right? Or an analog is bad management to blame for a not good culture?
I think bad management is bad management, right? A successful company, like an IBM, right? And I'm not saying IBM is good culture, bad culture, but you don't the culture that created this giant company that has been incredibly successful. You don't that culture. There was a culture that drove that and built that and created. Okay, let's change that. Again, I think it goes back to you change the behavior, not the culture.
Yeah, I think they're different aspects of culture, and no, we're never going to change the fundamental culture of respect for the individual and those things of IBM. That's one kind of culture. There's another kind of culture that has to do with how people work and how they think about work. And I've always done it this way, which drives me nuts. Or let's change to figure out the continuous learning, continuous improvement process. Developers doing unit testing, shifting left, security, having developers think about security and not having security just doing it at the end. All that is part of culture, and that's why I say culture in that. But I think the comment about, it really is going back to the old ways of working. As someone I started doing development, a few years ago, maybe. In some ways, it really is, because we didn't used to have all these, this huge life cycle of somebody else to go do testing for us. We didn't used to have. It used to be you did it, you built it, you tested it, you ran it, you did it. And so maybe it is shifting back. But, in IT, everything goes in circles anyway. So.
What's old is new, you're right. Just another comment, Ricardo said it's always about the people no matter what. Yes, it is. John, to your point, Mike wrote in, Andrew evidently did the keynote over at DevOps Days Phoenix earlier this year. And he said that, I'm just trying to get this, wondering if we've lost some of that. Getting back to roots was Andrew's thing. And Mike's wondering if with all this talk about evolving and changing and growing, have we lost some of the specialness, if you will? And I'm paraphrasing here. Have we lost some of what made DevOps so attractive and great to begin with?
Yeah, I think that was the point. He probably, I don't know if he used the technology adaptation lifecycle in that presentation, but I think that was, he was trying to point out that there was pure motivation early to have a competitive advantage and seeking advantage. If we remember when DevOps started, it was mostly greenfield organizations. And in fact, the first DevOps days, I mean, I remember Damon and I were on the original panel for selection for the DevOps Enterprise Summit. And there was always this argument, and Damon would follow up on the arguments. I just lay back and sort of watch. But the big four, the big five would argue that you can't do DevOps in the enterprise. You're a bunch of young kids. You don't understand infrastructure. It can't work. And Damon would have these lengthy, if this is my memory, it may be wrong, lengthy arguments with these guys. And then that first, in fact, I have a funny story about Rosalind, is that first we put out the CFP and we got all these like enterprise, like glorious stories of large enterprises saying, hey, no, we're trying it. It's hard. It doesn't work. And then Gene comes running to me. He goes, listen to this, John. It's a woman from IBM who's basically doing a mainframe with DevOps. And I look at him like, holy crap, I worked with her in the 1980s. Back in the old days.
Of course, Rosalind was just a very, very young woman at the time, John.
Hey, I was young
right?
too back then. Too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure. But it's true. It's true. Hey, things are coming in hot now from the audience. So let me see if I could grab a few more of these. Teams and management need to adopt lean thinking, as Rosalind said, removing waste. It sounds like a Deming question to me, John.
You make me sound like the blowhard here, because I'm answering all the questions. Yeah, I mean, it definitely waste, but also flow. So I think the sort of they go together, which is lean. Lean is about sort of flow and waste. And not necessarily theory constraints, but generally directly related to GoRat's work.
Yeah. You know what? Let's go to a self-proclaimed vendor in the crowd here, Mav. Mav, how do you, this whole DevOps business unit, what you guys are doing with Tricentis, lean, these concepts playing into it, how do you kind of merge them, marry them? Where's rubber meet the road there?
Yeah, the reality is there's no single definition, and everybody's using different processes, and everybody says we're using this process is actually not using that process and interpreting it and living, and that's okay, right? I'm not a purist of this is the one right way, because each back I'll come back to the culture conversation for a second. Each company's culture is different, and the expectations are different, and there are some adaptations that need to be made. And I think it hits to John's earlier point about the big enterprise, new introduction of DevOps. We can't do this, because the point to me is not to say we do DevOps. Here's our checklist to show you, to prove to you that we do DevOps. It's to say, how do we get better? How do we improve? How are we thinking about our process improvement? And how are we teaming on the problems? Whether that teaming is developers, now we're running software differently than an on-prem world where we kind of control everything. Now we have security shifting left, as Rosalind was talking about earlier. How are we teaming to solve these problems and just getting better and better wherever we're at? And I think that's the key. And one of the things, since you called out the vendor side, I'll pitch for a second, is when we did a lot of these surveys is to try to understand characteristics of people who self-identified as mature DevOps organizations. One of the key findings we kind of pulled out of that was that typically those that pulled the responsibility of quality and testing earlier in that process and took ownership of that were more mature organizations. And so I think that responsibility component is really important to me. And there was a comment in the chat about this as well. Is it the manager's job? Is it the individual's job? But that responsibility of the team to understand what they need to do to be successful and not pushing it out. Or I think one of the comments said they don't know why they are doing what they're doing. Somebody told them to do it, so they're doing it. That is antithetical to the DevOps culture, I believe, right? That ownership, that responsibility, and that partnership, kind of, you started to look at those patterns and you said, oh, that's DevOps. They're trying to improve continuously. They're pairing with the right folks to be successful. And I think that component is very valuable to keep in mind, because that applies to all organizations wherever you're at on that journey, and not get overwhelmed by how much change you think you need to do to be the best, or to look at some of these case studies we see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, if no one has a thought follow on to Mav, I wanted Vernon put out something here that I think is pretty cool too, and that is, can't we integrate KPIs and corporate values and stakeholders into the culture somehow? He still finds people who don't know what why they are doing stuff. And I think you're always going to find that. But Damon, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think this is the age-old question, right? Is how do you align a bunch of human beings to achieve some end goal, right? And I think this, whether you're putting armies together or manufacturing, the early days industrial revolution to early days of computers to agile to now it's DevOps. I think there's this long progression of where people are trying to align human beings towards achieving some sort of goal. So I think that we've kind of, as a DevOps movement, have sort of hit that same wall, right? And we're trying to, from a technology organization, kind of wag the tail wagging the dog here, right? And we've realized, like I said before, like it was a deployment problem. No, it was a collaboration problem. No, it was a people organizational problem. Now it's a business problem, right? This is a human management problem, right? So I think, this is one of the central ideas that I think the DevOps movement has led to, right? Which is looking at saying, are we aligning people towards that customer value that we're delivering? So, I think, and just saying, hey, we should measure everything. Remember, that was a big thing early on in the DevOps movement. And then we found ourselves just measuring a bunch of random stuff, right? Because we're missing that business alignment of, what are we measuring? What I'm measuring towards. So, I don't have a clear answer for this one, as you can tell, but that is it's not a technology issue, it's a business issue, right? And that's all. And I think that aperture needs to be opened up to the executives that want to, achieve these results that others have achieved. Like, people talk a lot about the Netflix, their technology organizations. Right? But if you read their freedom and responsibility, like that culture deck that Netflix had famously, people think it's not a technology organization issue, right? It's a business it's how they run their whole entire business. So when you run your business that way, right? So for people who are trying to replicate those results of that technology organization, what ends up happening is they try to do it from the technology organization only, and it doesn't really work, right? And so it's that great change that's really this problem if we want to talk about things like culture and alignment to value and those sorts of things. Did I get to an answer there?
Yeah, no, I think somewhere in there, Damon, you might have hit on a couple things. Actually, I think it flows well into what Yavor in the audience talked about, and that's resilience, right? DevOps supposedly promotes this blame-free culture. And when something goes wrong, the focus is not on blaming who or what, but on understanding the systematic issues that led to the blame and on trying to prevent that in the future, right? And that encompasses, the blameless postmortem and some of this cultural stuff. But, as someone who's tried to practice this for a while, it's hard, because you may come to the point that the systematic issues are the people. But I'm talking as a CEO now. Rosalind, you're laughing. Mav, what do you guys think?
Yes. So we've been transitioning to a learning from incidents model to try and get out of that who caused the problem, but what in the system caused the problem. And we have a very large transition going on in our environment. And it really is important to focus on learning how to help the organization not make the same mistake twice. Identifying that a person screwed up doesn't help anything unless it's somebody who screws up, all the time. But that's a totally different discussion. That's a personnel discussion. It really is around what in the system is making it difficult to actually deliver back value. And so really the idea of learning from incidents, learning from what happened to help improve overall is is a really helpful change, but it's a change in culture. It's a change in the way of thinking about things. It's a change in the way of people interacting and working together. And so I really think that as we think about DevOps and as we think about this transition, it really is this continuous learning attitude that we're trying to bring in our daily work. And it applies to incidents, it applies to automating our pipelines, it applies to all of these phases. If we're trying to learn from and do better, then we're changing our environment to do better and to help us in this, as everybody's talking about the value stream management in the comments, having this discussion of I need to align. And at a huge company, I can't just have one big company. I have to have some alignment. I'm going to end up with some silo. So let me make sure that silo is at least delivering business value and learning how to continuously improve it.
Fair. You know what we've had a couple of threads here on value stream management, and it has garnered a lot of oxygen over the last couple of years. Is it a nice to have? Is it a necessity? John, you mentioned flow earlier, right? And people kind of associate that with VSM. Scott on the audience says VSM is a must if you're doing DevOps. That's how you'll be able to see delays and waste and so forth. I will tell you from a Techstrong point of view, we've covered VSM a lot. And when we do VSM webinars and stuff like that, sometimes it's challenging getting a big crowd, right? It's not as eagerly embraced, I think, as some of the other concepts that DevOps has introduced or has helped introduce. John, if you wouldn't mind, and go. No,
I'll say I had a
David.
reason why. If you guys can hear me, I had a reason why because that is the fundamental shift I was talking about. Because forget all the people the VSM, they go into like the minutia. Just visualizing the work from a left to right, from a how did this start, where did this come from, to we've delivered what it is to the customer, like the pull, the message that we need to finish the execution. How does the work actually flow in a horizontal way? Most people don't have that orientation, right? They have the other orientation, which is sort of their myopic kind of siloed view, and the work sort of pops into them, right? And I think getting people to see work as an end-to-end flow like system, most people don't even understand. They think they do. Oh, I know it goes on over there. And when you actually lay it out on the whiteboard, it blows their mind. They're like, wait a minute, that's how it happens, or that's why you do this, or why do I need this way? Like this conversations happen organically when they see it as an end-to-end process. Like if we went to a factory and we said, hey, the TVs are falling off the assembly line. The 6 of us right now could run down there, watch the assembly line for maybe 10 minutes, see a TV fall off, and go right to solutions. Because in our mind, we're all seeing the factory, we've seen the TV fall off. Like we put up a net, we slow it down, we change the belt. Like because we had the shared mental model. But in knowledge work, especially in large organizations, it's all just different ideas in everyone's heads, right? So this idea of going from sort of this siloed view of the world to this horizontal kind of end-to-end flow-based view, that is the whole turn, right? And I think for a lot of folks, that kind of breaks the whole mental model of how they work or what they're doing. So I think people would understand, those who have seen it, those who have kind of opened their eyes to it go, oh, this is essential. We got to do it. But if you're never kind of been exposed to the end-to-end view of the world and had that conversation, understand, how flow works, then it's the kind of thing you sort of think, why do I even need that? In fact, when John and I used to do these workshops years ago, early introducing this idea to companies, the people would sit there with their arms crossed, as grumpy as heck, like, why am I here? This is a waste of time. We know what happens here. And then like an hour in, people are just like glued. They're like, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe I didn't know all this. Or like, by the end of the day, they're like, this is the greatest thing we've ever done. Right. This was worth 20 people getting in a room and doing this for an entire day. And, my favorite part is we had one executive come in and he looks at the board and he goes, there's a whole lot of stupid up here, and a lot of it's got my name on it. and he's like, and we're going to do something about this. And he left the room. Right. So I think it's one of those mind-changing things, but I think so much of going from a traditional functional org chart view of the world to that, horizontal, value stream view of the world, that encapsulates, I think, the DevOps movement in a nutshell.
Yeah, and value stream mapping came from Mike Rother, right, Toyota Kata, in his Learning to See book, right, and then Karen Martin wrote a great book, and value stream mapping, like Damon described, and ones we've done together, and ones I've done after, it's brilliant to watch that whole lot of stupid be exposed. My only point earlier about necessary, not sufficient, or beware of tribes is, I think as humans, there's the observability tribe, there's the SRE tribe, there's the value stream or the flowcon tribe, right? And we sort of isolate in and create these enclaves of knowledge. And what we really should always be thinking about is systems thinking. And in fact, Mitch pointed out Senge, right? The sort of the father of sort of cognitive models and mental models and systems thinking, right? That I just worry that as I watch a lot of good friends of mine go down and deep dive into the Flowcon, the value stream mapping consortium, all that stuff is great, but there's no escape velocity of things like risk, reliability, and again, I don't know what the correct answer for that is just I mean, my only sort of advice is just be careful to sort of go all in on one idea, because it does consume you. Value stream mapping is the tactile nature of watching it and seeing people sort of jump up and say, "Oh, I didn't know you did that," or "I didn't know it worked that way." It is a brilliant exercise to go through. But anyway,
Yep. No, agreed. And that's nothing against the consortiums and Flowtopia and everything we see going on with it. I wanted to bring up another concept from the audience Vernon brought up. So there was a lot of discussion when we first launched DevOps.com. How does it work? By top down, bottom up, middle out, all of the above, none of the above. And certainly, I think a concept my friend Gary Groover, who we haven't spoken to in a while, right? Gary used to preach was sort of air cover for the people on the ground doing DevOps work. You needed executive buy-in. You needed executive sponsorship to have a successful DevOps transformation. And, Vernon makes the point where, hey, if we want CEOs and other C-level folks, I guess, to, want IT alignment and become willing to drive it and give that air cover, how do we make that happen? How does that happen? Is the kind of the center of excellence paradigm that we've seen with other movements, with other technologies. Is that how that kind of gets implemented, or is there, how else do we get that sort of top-down cover? Rosalind, how about you on this one to lead it off, and then everyone else jump in?
You be lucky and you have the right executives. Oh, that's not the right answer, right?
Yeah. Well, that always helps. It's always better to be lucky than smart. But if you're not.
Yeah, to be honest, it really is making sure that your senior executives or the executives that can influence have enough clarity and understanding of why the value is for them, what the value is for them, why they need to do it, what's the real business value. And that's really why we have to translate DevSecOps and whatever words we want to use to a business discussion of delivering business value with higher quality, et cetera. What is the right buzzwords? Which buzzword bingo works with your executive to explain why this is value to them, value to the organization, to get them to see the value. And a lot of times that actually takes a team succeeding in doing something and demonstrating that to senior leadership, and then now senior leadership will help push it. But we have to not talk about DevOps for DevOps. We have to talk about what's the business value? What does the business get out of what we're trying to say? And that's what we need to do to get the CXs to understand, to then give us the space and the work.
Fair.
Yeah. I know. You know what we were saying earlier. John had a great requote about, you know, DevOps for advantage, or for advantage versus DevOps for legitimacy, right? And I think we have to remember that at the early time when this DevOps came on the scene, it was all about the cloud, right? There was the mandate to get to the cloud. There was the digital transformation that came with that, right? So digital transformation in the cloud was the thing. So if you could talk about that and display how these ideas would help you get there faster or cheaper, or, you know, faster and cheaper, then everybody was all ears, right? And I think now if you're doing sort of DevOps for legitimacy, like, oh, we just have to do this because everyone's doing it, you're not going to get people to want to really change things, right? So I think you have to align to, well, what's the new thing, right? And I think, I mean, we haven't gone 51 minutes without saying the word AI, but it's got to be generative AI, right? Like, how do we apply these new technologies, right? And I think if you can say, look, you know, we don't have a hope and a prayer if we use these old broken kind of ways of working to try to move in this very dynamic, fast moving. So, you know, how do we operationalize all of this new AI work that we're going to have to be done? How do we build and run and monitor these new systems? I think, you know, if we can align towards that, you're going to get people's attention, right? And I think you go all the way back to Agile. You know, Agile went a certain way down this path. You read the Agile Manifesto, it's darn good. But so along the way, it kind of, those who got it. The rest of the people sort of just kind of bastardized it into, you know, Scrum or whatever it was. And that sort of became the plateau. And then DevOps came along and we got a little bit further, and still there's work to be done. And I think unless you attach to the new thing, you know, the DevOps for advantage, which has got to be DevOps for, I think, AI, I think everyone's talking about, you aren't going to get that executive will to change, or even the executive ability to change, right? Because they have the things that they need to deliver, they need to focus on. You've got to align towards that. It's not like they don't want to improve things. They just have a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of focus, you know, to provide. And so we've got to align to those goals. And I'm going to argue that, you know, AI is the thing we have to align ourselves to.
Yeah, one thing, just to build on kind of both of those comments, in general, the C-suite doesn't care about how, other than wanting to be able to use the terms, oh, my team is so much better because we were delivering products twice as fast or whatever, because we're doing the buzzword. So they want to be able to compete in the buzzword game when that conversation comes up. But really, they don't know how. They want the results. And then your board, the only reason they care about it is because some of the other companies are on. Somebody there told them that they got faster, higher quality, more product out, better results because of those things. But even if you've changed inside the black box how you do your thing and your externalities look the same, they're not really going to care. And so you have to, back to kind of Rosalind, your point, tie that back to that business impact that you're expecting to get out of that. Not, we're going to spend the next 18 months doing this big project and we'll be better. How are you going to be better? And it comes back to the KPIs. What's the objective? And in general, that's literally all of our jobs, is to improve our business, to get better, to have those bigger outcomes, whether it's generative AI, whether it's something else. You have to have a generative AI story. You have to say, and I'll take a little bit of a counter position just for fun here with Damon. Even if you say that that's not actually relevant to your business somehow, I don't know how you would do that. But let's say there's a reason, having thought out and made the case and understanding why it's not relevant because you're going to do something else. That statement is very important for, as a technology leader, wherever you are at in your business, because if you don't know and you just kind of slough it off and you clearly haven't done the research, then you're no longer credible there. So you have to understand, even if, and I'm using generative AI as the example because it's obviously relevant, whatever new technology trend is coming through, you need to understand it well enough to understand if it applies, how it applies, when it applies, to have that conversation, and that way that your executive suite, your board, whomever understands where you're at with there. So hopefully, Damon, that's not too argumentative to your point, because I generally agree with you that generative AI is going to definitely, we're using it all over the place. So I can't think of an example in our business where that wouldn't be applicable. But I'm sure there's always edge cases, right?
Absolutely. Guys, I need to jump in here real quick. We give out 4 Amazon gift cards at every one of these, and the winners of today's Amazon cards are Jennifer C., looks like Alex O., Andrea A., and Vincent K. Cody, our Techstrong Learning Crew will be reaching out and getting you your Amazon gift cards. Thank you very much for participating today. Also, in that vein, if you go in the chat section here, there is a quick post from Cody J. Brown, who's our Techstrong moderator, with a survey to fill out. Guys, we can't make these better unless we understand what it is you want and what you like and don't like. So take a quick minute, fill out our survey if you could let us. We're not asking necessarily for emails or contacts, right? But we just want to know what you like or don't like about these shows so we can continuously improve them. Like any good DevOps shows should, right? Get our feedback loops going on. Guys, we're down in the last couple minutes here. John, I also wanted to thank you for answering that question around ageism in DevOps and in technology in general. I mean, with the exception of Rosalind, looking at everyone else on our panel today, it's hard to make the case that there's an ageism problem. We've all been around the block a couple of times. But nevertheless, I think, John, as you said, in Silicon Valley, it might be a little more prevalent to go with the whiz kids than people who've been there, done that for a long time. Mitchell also weighed in on that too, and appreciate that. But guys, just wrapping up, Mav, if you don't mind, you know what? You're here from Tricentis. They're the sponsor. And they, no matter how much I prod them, I can never get them to really step up and own it, right? Even though they pay for it. So I'm going to ask you to own it and kind of take the last word here in terms of DevOps, where it's going, where it is.
No, I appreciate that. And honestly, what we just value is the conversation and the opportunity as opposed to just hitting everybody over the head with product stuff, right? I mentioned this earlier, right? It's not about product for product's sake, and I think some of the other conversations, but we do believe that in order to be really successful, moving fast, you do need, automation, and we try to make solutions to make that automation easier, faster, test management to make sure you have good visibility around what's going on, and particularly in more complex, larger environments, that gets harder and harder, and then performance testing to make sure how is this thing going to, not just how it's going to scale, but how is it going to react and respond under different load conditions, and making sure that you're thoughtful of those practices. And so we do make a bunch of great products, I believe, in order to help you be successful with that, no matter where you're at, right? Are you dealing with complex enterprise end-to-end technology, or are you super small, nimble team of just 5 people that started a year ago, and so you get to use a bunch of whatever tech stack you choose instead of inheriting something? We've got products that can help you be successful with all of those, and then I do think there are products, open source, paid products, but don't start with the product. Start with that continuous improvement and what business problem you're trying to solve, and working with that team mindset about how do we. I actually liked how John hit it earlier. What are the behaviors that we want to improve? What are the behaviors that we want to focus on? And that will lead you to success. And then you can find tools that will help you be successful as part of that bigger change. So hopefully, Alan, that checks your requirement for a little bit of a pitch.
Thank you, Mav. I appreciate it. And I think our audience does as well. So John, Damon, Mitchell, joining us from hotel rooms today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days and your trips to be with us here. Rosalind, it's always a pleasure to have you on, as you know. Thank you. Mav, great job. I appreciate you on the show today. Mitchell, I don't know if you want to take the last word, or are you kind of, I know bandwidth is an issue there. No, yep. Mitchell might be out. All right. Hey, everyone. Most of all, our audience, these shows really are about you. And I think today was a perfect example. Probably 80% of what we talked about came from our audience. So still going on. Mikey, who has some really good stuff to say today, has some good work on ageism here. Guys, we will be back with our regular DevOps Unbound in about 2 weeks, and we'll be doing another live roundtable webinar from DevOps Unbound, and you can check out the schedule on techstrong.com. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong and Tricentis. Thanks again for your sponsorship. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.